When we talk about transforming the body, a lot of people believe it all comes down to going to the gym and lifting a few weights. But the truth is very different. Building a strong, defined, muscular physique isn't simple. It requires time, discipline, and a lot of consistency. It's not something that happens overnight. If you've ever tried to gain muscle, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Interestingly, losing weight is often easier than gaining muscle. In many cases, simply adjusting your diet can make the scale start dropping. Even with a few slip-ups here and there, it's still possible to lose a few pounds, or a few kilograms. But when the goal is to build real muscle mass, the situation changes completely. Suddenly, every small detail starts to matter. Building muscle requires intense training, proper nutrition, and consistency over time. It's a slow construction process where the body needs to adapt, recover, and gradually evolve. There's no magic shortcut. Every training session, every meal, and every night of sleep becomes part of a cycle that needs to work in harmony. That's why when you see someone with a truly impressive physique, well-defined, full, proportional muscles, it's important to understand that it didn't happen by accident. That look is the result of years of dedication, effort, and discipline. And that's exactly where the topic of today's video begins. Many people train hard and eat well, but still don't get the results they expect. The reason can often be small daily habits that quietly sabotage muscle growth without the person even realizing it. Today, we're going to reveal 5 silent villains that may be blocking your progress. The question is, could one of them already be part of your routine? Let's find out. But before we talk about the mistakes that might be sabotaging your results, there's one important thing first. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a like. Now, getting back to the topic of the video, let's understand how muscle actually grows. Many people believe muscles grow simply because you lift weights at the gym. But the process behind muscular hypertrophy is much more interesting and also much more complex than it might seem. Muscle hypertrophy is basically the process where muscle fibers grow and become stronger. When you perform an intense workout, especially using challenging weights, your muscle fibers experience tiny microscopic tears. These micro tears are a natural part of training. In fact, they're exactly the stimulus the body needs to start adapting and improving. After the workout, the body enters recovery mode. It interprets those micro tears as a signal that the muscles need to become stronger to handle similar stress in the future. So the body begins a repair process, rebuilding the muscle fibers thicker and more resilient than before. That's how, over time, muscles become bigger and stronger. But for this process to work efficiently, 3 factors are absolutely essential. The first is intense training. If the muscle isn't truly challenged, there's no reason for it to grow. The stimulus created by training is what starts the entire adaptation process in the body. The second factor is proper nutrition, which provides the nutrients needed to rebuild muscle tissue. And the third factor is hormones, which regulate the entire recovery and growth process. Now let's talk about the first villain that could be sabotaging your muscle gains, and for many people, this one might come as a surprise: using ice directly on your muscles right after training. You've probably seen athletes stepping into ice baths or applying cold packs after intense activity. Because of that, many people started believing that ice always helps recovery. And in some situations, ice really does play an important role. It's commonly used to reduce inflammation and relieve pain, especially in cases of injuries or impacts. In sports like soccer, for example, it's very common to see players using ice after intense matches. The goal there is to control inflammatory responses caused by collisions or extreme effort. But when it comes to weight training, there's a very important detail to understand. During a heavy workout, your body naturally creates an inflammatory process inside the muscle. And that inflammation isn't a bad thing. In fact, it's part of the mechanism that signals the body that those muscle fibers were stressed and need to be rebuilt. When you apply ice directly to your muscles right after training, you may actually reduce that inflammatory process that is essential for hypertrophy. In other words, you're lowering the signal your body uses to rebuild the muscle bigger and stronger. This can interfere with the body's natural adaptation process to training. This doesn't mean ice should never be used. In cases of joint pain or potential injuries, like issues with the knee, shoulder, or elbow, it can be very helpful. But applying ice directly to muscles like the legs, arms, or chest believing it will speed up muscle growth can actually do the opposite. So the question is this habit part of your post-workout routine? Because the next villain might be even more common. The second villain that could be sabotaging your muscle gains is something extremely common among people who train: taking medication right after a heavy workout. Many people finish an intense training session, feel sore the next day, and immediately reach for some kind of medicine to ease the discomfort. It may seem like a simple solution, but it can actually be hurting your results. Among the most commonly used medications are painkillers, anti-inflammatory drugs, and muscle relaxants. When soreness kicks in, especially after a brutal leg day, many people think, "I'll just take something to feel better quickly." The problem is that these medications directly interfere with a natural process that happens inside the body after training. Just like with the use of ice, these medications reduce the inflammatory process that occurs in muscle fibers after an intense workout. And remember what we talked about earlier, this inflammation isn't a problem, it's actually a key part of the mechanism that signals the body that the muscles need to recover and grow. When you block that process with medication, you may end up reducing the stimulus required for hypertrophy. In other words, it's almost like part of the work you did in the gym gets cancelled out. You trained hard, created the right stimulus, but then interfered with the body's natural recovery response. Of course, there are specific situations where medication may be necessary, especially in cases of injuries or when recommended by a doctor. But when it comes to regular post-workout soreness, the well-known delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS, it's often just a sign that the muscle was properly stimulated and is going through the adaptation process. The third villain that could be hurting your results in the gym is something very common in many people's routines: excessive alcohol consumption. After an entire week of training hard, staying disciplined, and sticking to a controlled diet, the weekend arrives and many people decide to relax a little. After all, going out with friends and enjoying some downtime is also part of life. But the real question is, how much can this affect your results? Alcohol has what's known as a catabolic effect on the body. That means it can contribute to muscle breakdown rather than helping build new muscle tissue. On top of that, alcohol causes dehydration and interferes with several important physiological processes involved in muscle recovery. And as we've already seen, recovery is exactly the phase when muscles actually grow. Another important factor is what happens inside the body when alcohol is metabolized. During this process, the body produces a substance called acetaldehyde, which is toxic. The liver has to work hard to eliminate this substance from the body. While that's happening, several important metabolic processes can become compromised. This extra stress on the liver can make it harder for the body to properly absorb vitamins and nutrients needed for recovery. In other words, even if you're eating well during the week, excessive alcohol consumption can interfere with how those nutrients are actually used. That directly affects muscle recovery and, as a result, muscle growth. This creates a very common cycle: intense training during the week followed by heavy drinking on the weekend. The result can be a constant pattern of progress and setbacks, where part of the progress you made ends up being lost. This doesn't mean you can never drink. Small, occasional amounts, like a glass of wine, are unlikely to have a major impact. The real problem begins when alcohol consumption becomes excessive and frequent. The fourth villain that can completely sabotage your results is something many people do with the best intentions: following extreme or miracle diets. Who hasn't heard of diets that promise incredibly fast results? The Moon Diet, the Cucumber Diet, diets based only on chicken and salad, or even meal plans that completely eliminate carbohydrates and fats. These strategies usually appear with a very appealing promise: rapid weight loss. And in many cases, the number on the scale may actually drop during the first few days or weeks. The problem is that this weight loss doesn't always represent a real improvement in body composition. In many situations, along with fat, the body also ends up losing muscle mass. When that happens, the result can be a weaker physique, less definition, and lower energy levels. You may have seen situations like this before: someone loses a lot of weight in a short period of time, but they end up looking more tired, fragile, or even less healthy than before. That happens because the body didn't just lose fat, it also lost muscle. Another very common mistake is becoming obsessed with the scale. Many people measure their progress only by the number they see there. But body weight alone doesn't tell the whole story. What truly matters is body composition, how much fat you lost and how much muscle mass you managed to keep or build. That's why the best strategy is always to follow a balanced and sustainable diet. A nutrition plan that provides the right amounts of protein, carbohydrates, healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals to fuel your body and support your training. Building muscle and improving your physique takes time, and extreme diets are rarely part of a healthy and lasting approach. The fifth and final villain that may be hurting your muscle gains is something extremely basic, yet still widely neglected: hydration. It may sound too simple to be a real problem, but the truth is that water plays a fundamental role in almost every process in the body, including muscle building. And when hydration is lacking, both performance and recovery can be directly affected. To understand how important water is, about 70% of the human body is made up of it. Muscles, in particular, rely heavily on proper hydration to function correctly. Water participates in processes such as nutrient transport, muscle contraction, recovery, and even regulating body temperature during training. There's also a direct relationship between water and carbohydrates inside the body. When you consume carbohydrates, they are stored in the muscles in the form of glycogen. And each part of glycogen pulls approximately 3 parts of water into the muscle cell. In other words, without proper hydration, this process cannot happen efficiently. That means even if you're eating well and training correctly, a lack of water can prevent your body from using nutrients properly. The result may be reduced performance in the gym, slower recovery, and even difficulty gaining muscle. A very common recommendation is to consume about 50 milliliters of water per kilogram of body weight per day, which is roughly 0.8 ounces per pound of body weight. But there's an important detail: hydration needs to be spread throughout the day. Drinking a large amount of water all at once and then going the rest of the day without hydrating won't be effective. Maintaining a consistent water intake can be one of the simplest and at the same time most powerful habits for improving your results in the gym. After learning about the 5 villains that can sabotage your muscle gains, it's important to understand that hypertrophy doesn't depend only on training and nutrition. There are other equally important factors that often go unnoticed but have a direct impact on recovery and, consequently, muscle growth. One of the most important factors is sleep quality. Many people believe muscles grow only during the workout, but in reality a large part of the process happens while you sleep. During deep sleep, the body releases important hormones, such as growth hormone, which plays a direct role in repairing and rebuilding muscle fibers. Another key element is stress management. When the body experiences high levels of stress for long periods, it increases the production of hormones like cortisol. In excess, this hormone can disrupt the ideal environment for muscle building, interfering with recovery and even slowing down progress in training. Hormonal balance also plays a crucial role. Hormones such as testosterone, growth hormone, and other metabolic regulators are directly involved in the hypertrophy process. When these levels are balanced, the body responds much better to both training stimuli and proper nutrition. Finally, it's also important to be cautious with the use of medications. Some drugs can interfere with hormonal, inflammatory, or metabolic processes that influence muscle growth. For that reason, whenever there's a need to use medication frequently, the best approach is to seek medical guidance. Small adjustments in these areas can make a huge difference in your progress. Throughout this video, we've seen that building muscle goes far beyond simply going to the gym and lifting weights. Many times, someone trains hard, eats well, and still doesn't see the results they expect. And the reason may lie in small daily habits that seem harmless but end up directly interfering with the body's recovery process and muscle growth. Recapping the key points we discussed, we looked at 5 villains that can sabotage your results. The first was using ice directly on your muscles after a workout, which can reduce the inflammatory process that's actually necessary for muscle hypertrophy. Then we talked about using medications to relieve muscle soreness, which can also interfere with the body's natural response to the stimulus created during training. We also discussed the impact of excessive alcohol consumption, which can impair muscle recovery and make it harder for the body to properly absorb important nutrients. Another major issue we covered was extreme or miracle diets. These plans often promise fast results, but they frequently lead to muscle loss and negatively affect your overall body composition. Finally, we looked at hydration, an essential factor that many people still overlook. Water is involved in countless processes within the body, and maintaining proper hydration throughout the day is critical to ensure the body functions efficiently and can recover properly from training. Now we want to hear from you. Do any of these habits show up in your routine? Have you ever noticed one of them affecting your results? Let us know in the comments, share your experience, and suggest new topics you'd like to see here on the channel. And of course, keep following our content to continue learning more about training, health, and building muscle.